We are about to start, and I'd like to introduce aLuna. We will be learning from the leading neuroscience to support us in aligning with our divine design. The brain functions from a limited perspective of scarcity, yet our ability to perceive and receive the present moment expands our good beyond our imagination. Let us deepen together in our understanding of our true divine nature. BHS, please give a warm welcome, aLuna!
Okay, does that work? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? I could probably yell loud enough.
Jeremy's going to unmute you.
Oh, I'm muted. There you go.
How do I say? Oh, there you go. Now, I don't have power over how loud that is, do I? Okay, I just don't want to echo and be too big. So, thank you so much, Melissa, for inviting me. I got up at the practitioner retreat and I shared this, and she came running up to me saying, "Oh, would you please come to Business Honoring Spirituality?" So I said, "Sure." And I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad that I'm here, truly. And it's something that absolutely excites me, because after being a practitioner, 18 years I'm going on, I'm almost an emeritus, yay! And working with hundreds of people, I started realizing that the things that we work with really pertain, if we take it back and make it not personal, we're talking about our biology, which is very curious, right? Because think about how personal we take everything. We take everything very personal, right? So I'm a hidden brain. Anyone hear of Hidden Brain podcast? Yeah, anyone listen to it? If not, please do. It is the cutting edge of psychology and neuroscience, and it really helps us understand, what was the word I heard going around so much today? Relationship, right? Yes. It helps us in our understanding our relationships to ourselves, to other people. I didn't know until I was looking this up last night that it launched in 2015. So there is a ton of really good things that you can look up, right? So I am not a neuroscientist. I am a practitioner. But this woman, Lisa Feldman Barrett, is one of the most cited scientists in the world for her revolutionary research in psychology and neuroscience. She has this fantastic book called How Emotions Are Made: The Secret Life of the Brain. And she does this incredible podcast, not only on Hidden Brain, but when you go there, you'll see that she has a ton of other podcasts that really bring some, I think, extraordinary information to us, to help us. So I'm going to start with a quote. How many people have read All the Light We Cannot See? Beautiful book, right? It's also a movie. The brain is locked in total darkness. Of course, children, says the voice. So in the book, he's speaking over the radio to children. It floats in a clear liquid inside the skull, never in the light. And yet, the world it constructs in the mind is full of light. It brims with color and movement. So how, children, does the brain, which lives without a spark of light, build for us a world full of light? So think about that. Just sit with that for a second, right? Like the brain is inside. Total darkness. And yet there's this whole world that we perceive. So the light we see and the sounds we hear are not really comprised of signals from the outside world. Right? Like, wait a minute, I think I'm seeing you. I think I'm seeing this. I think I'm hearing this. I think I'm experiencing this. But what's true is they are mostly creations of the mind itself. Okay. Oh, I gotta point it this way. Oh. The brain constructs our reality from the inside out. Right? Don't you think it's, as I'm saying this, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of talking about a paradigm shift here. Right? But aren't we in a paradigm shift right now on the planet? It sure appears that we are, right? So, it's actually an inverse problem. Sensory signals on the outside, receiving from all the receptors all over the body, send bits to the brain, right? So we have receptors in our skin, we have receptors in our eyes, we have receptors in our ears, and it's sending all of these bits and pieces to the brain. But it has to guess as to the causes of the signals, right? So it's curious because even when those guesses are wrong, those guesses or predictions become our experience, right? So what I'm saying is the brain is actually predictive. It's predictive. It's not responsive. It's predictive. And that says a lot about who we are in our relationships that we have with people, with our businesses, with our life, with our own self, with our bodies. Okay? So why is this happening, right? Doesn't it seem like, okay, we're here, we're getting all these senses, that we should be receiving these senses, and then we respond. But what's true is, that would be metabolically inefficient, right? The most effective way to run a system is to predict, then to correct when necessary. So not only, so reaction or response is more expensive metabolically. And for evolution wants to evolve. In order to evolve, it seeks to conserve. Right? So I'm saying all this from a scientific standpoint, but what does that mean? That means that we are built from the inside out based on scarcity. That our whole body is based on, there isn't enough glucose. There isn't enough glucose. Isn't that astounding? I just think, really, is the demise of humanity is because we're based in an old system that says there isn't enough glucose? When clearly there's enough glucose, when clearly there's enough energy, but our body is based on scarcity. And from that place, we don't have the energy to actually be in the present moment and receive the signals or the impulse. Or at least that's what the body believes. Right? How many people have been to a meditation retreat? Yeah. How many people have done like deep, long spiritual work? If you go to Dr. Rogers' retreat, what is the first thing he says? You're going to be tired. You're going to need to rest. You're going to want to eat a ton. Let your body do that. Why? Because we're actually pushing ourselves out of the predictive paradigm that the brain exists in, and we're trying with all of our might to come into the present moment. Isn't that astounding? So the first thing I want to say is, let's take a breath. Can we forgive ourselves? Do you know how often people judge and berate themselves because they can't sit and meditate? because they can't be present in the moment, because the energy to like be here now is way not as easy as it seems, right? It's a really good slogan, Ram Dass, and it's incredibly challenging because every part of our biology does not trust that we can do that.
More like a survival thing?
Yes, our body is wired for evolution, right? And that is from survival and fight or flight. But yet we are trying to evolve into these responsive, educated, spiritual beings, and there's a dissonance between this intention and our body. I cannot tell you how important it is to forgive yourself right now for that dissonance, right? Because we think that, oh, there must be something wrong with me. Well, I haven't done it well enough. How come they can do it and I can't do it? Blah, 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 blah. If we could just let that go, think of the space that would be available. We're actually trying to live into elevated idea. An elevated idea that there is abundance, that there is enough, and that we don't have to predict before something actually happens, right? So the goal of the brain is not accuracy. How many of you feel really good and comfortable when you're right? I sure think I do, right? I'm right. Well, that's a fallacy because the brain is actually not accurate at all in terms of what is actually happening. The goal of the brain is to predict better and more efficiently. So, are we even aware that that's what's happening? Right? We're in our world, we're making these assumptions, we're believing our perceptions, we're reacting and responding from this place, and it may not even be true or close to being true, right? Emotional reactions are not built into the brain. They are built by your brain in the moment as needed. And it all depends, here we go, here's the kicker, it all depends on what past experiences your brain is bringing to bear. Right? So to me, I'm like, oh, this is science of mind. This is what we're teaching. This is what they were talking about 100 years ago, before we knew that it was actually aligned in our biology. Right? So that is why we have to notice, though there's so many things that this tells us, and what we get to notice. We don't have to, right? But what we get to notice, right, is that to predict makes sense of the sensory signals from the body and the world. Okay, so it's predicting. Okay, I'm getting this and I'm predicting. But we usually have one predictive context, story, lens that we see the world through. That is going to be more likely than another. And what is always true? There is always another story our brain could have told.
I wonder if it would be helpful to give an example, like I think of the prediction brain. One of it's reading, you look at a word and it says it's this word. You look at it, it's a different word.
Yes.
I've noticed that a lot, glancing, so that people understand a little bit more about what the brain is doing.
Yes. So, okay, based on our past patterning, right? Based on our past patterning, it starts building a Rolodex, right? Well, this is how it normally happens. This is what it usually happens. But we don't hear the word normal or usual, right? So let me give you an example. It happens everywhere. It happens in our relationships. It happens in our marriages. It happens in our businesses, right? So And they even talk about it with the economy, right? That the economy depends on what people think is going to happen. It hasn't even happened yet. But because people think it's going to happen, then it starts to move in that direction, right? So if we can catch ourselves before we've set this prediction into motion, right? That's a divine devotion right there, right? Catch it before we set it into motion. So I'm married. I'm talking to my husband. I say the nicest, kindest, most compassionate thing to him from my perspective, right? And immediately I see his eyes go. You all know if you're in relationships, like the eyes, the face, the hands, the movement, right? And in my mind I'm going, oh, he's already left the conversation. Right? He's already left the conversation because he's moving into what his brain has predicted I'm saying. Right? And once that happens, very difficult to bring that person back. Right? Because then everything that you say is going to just be more evidence for the old prediction. This is not just our psychological makeup. This is the makeup of our brain. It's receiving sensory input. It's saying, oh yeah, I know what that is. It's this. And then from that point on, what we perceive is what we receive. All blinders shut down. We're only now looking for this because we've already decided this is what it is. This is what it is. Right? So think about, remember that old, I should have researched this, but I just remember when people said when the Spaniards came to the new lands, right? And the Native Americans couldn't even see the ships. And I thought, what the heck does that mean? How could they not have seen the ships, right? But this is the process of the brain. There was nothing in the Rolodex that even came close to what was before them. Right? So in the podcast, she's talking about, she says depression. Right? So depression is a very dense, constricted, metabolic experience, right? And the brain is always trying to keep us in allostasis, right? In balance, right? So when there's this energy going on and we're completely out of balance, it won't even let the person see something different. Right? Now, doesn't this make sense to you? Because you're standing here and you see this. And this person's standing here and they see that. And you're like, how are we standing here together? Right? Who's had that experience? And how much of that is going on right now in the country politically? This is how I see the world. This is how I see the world. How can you see the world like that? Well, part of it is the back Rolodex of experiences that this person has had, and then the predictions that they're making from that, perceiving that in the world. Right there. Right there. If we could just come to that understanding, not only can we forgive ourselves, but we can also practice dropping some judgment. I'm not saying it's okay that we see things so drastically different and that there's consequences from that, but just the acceptance of like, isn't that curious that you see the world like that? Okay, you wanted to say something.
I was going to say, when you talk about the political world and stuff, it's like if you've seen something before, then you're looking at it differently.
Yes.
So as a lesbian woman, as someone who's a social worker, working with people of color and all kinds of folks over my career, I look at the political landscape right now and I'm terrified.
Yes.
But my son who's only 15 and hasn't been through those same experiences, like, oh, maybe it's not gonna be that bad, Mama. I'm like, oh my God. Because I have seen that up close and personal over the years, right? And so that really hit home when you said that.
Yes, yes.
See, I think part of my concern and the problems I see is we lost the ability to do critical thinking. Do we true test what we think we understand and what our assumptions are? And most of us don't.
Yes.
And that's where we really break down.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I'm naturally that way. The roles I've done, when I was brought up, and all of that. And what I hear more and more from various different sources is, I heard this attending a banking conference with my wife, who's in that industry. And I was having dinner with these CEOs and bank presidents, and they were saying the younger generation has no idea how to do problem solving. And problem solving means you have to have critical thinking. What happens if my assumptions and understanding are incorrect?
Yes.
And am I willing to challenge what I believe the way that I thought the world was going to work?
Yes.
Isn't.
Yes. Yes. And to have an and then to go even deeper and to understand that it's based in our biology to see and perceive from scarcity. Like that to me says, whoa, okay, this is how our first initial, I love the saying, notice the first reaction and then choose the response, right? So we can notice with kindness, with compassion, not with judgment, that reaction I might have, right? Because it might be based in scarcity. It might be based in my limited perception of growing up in a rural working class town in Baldwinville, Massachusetts, right? It's like, that's the thing. Some people didn't even learn critical thinking.
Right.
Yeah, and we're losing that more and more in terms of with the schools changing, right?
Well, I think it's also, you know, I've been thinking about this on and off for the last few months. You know, how did I get the way that I am?
Yes.
One of the things is my father taught me to work with tools. And what you learn when you work with tools, you always don't have the right tool to get the job done. So what can you do to make it work? You know, 70% of the time, you can figure out some workaround, okay? So say you have a strip screw hole, you can put a bigger screw in it. Or you can plug it up and then put a screw in. And so we don't teach those skills. That's where it starts.
Right, right. And even like your ability to look at things and go, oh, there may be more than one option to what's before me.
Right. And so, and we don't teach it in school at all. We don't teach problem solving in schools at all. We don't teach problem solving even in businesses now. That's part of the problem. And this is what I hear from their businesses. So how do you solve a problem? You know, what is critical thinking?
Yes.
And, you know, I've been thinking about putting a group together to teach how do you do critical thinking. And what this is telling me is we have a predetermined way of what you're saying, looking at the world, and we don't have a mechanism that says, maybe I'm not seeing the whole picture.
Well, right, what does it take to just be, someone said humble, right? To have humility, to have the space to be able to go, this might not be what it appears to be, right? And we don't want to actually look at that because we get a lot of comfort, of safety, of identification by being right. Right?
Or just by doing the same thing you've always learned.
Yes, your word was beautiful. I'm like, oh my God, you should get up and talk. Adapt. That is what we have to do. We have to continuously adapt, right? Because our feelings are not responses to the world, but in fact are predictions about the world. Think about if we have the ability, right, to gift yourself with the space of this awareness, right? Anyone who works with me knows that what I believe is most important is that we're here to create space, right? To have that sacred pause, to be able to take a breath before we are confident. Curiosity, not confidence. Now, doesn't that seem, wait a minute, I'm here with a bunch of business people. When you all got up and spoke, you sounded so very confident in who you are and what you're doing. We promote that in our culture. We think that that gives us safety and strength. But what if the exact opposite was true? Can I stay curious with myself? Can I stay curious with another? Can I stay curious with those that I'm working with? Right? Can I be aware when I go and shake someone's hand and ask them, hey, do you need new windows? Or can I help you with your business? And their response is scarcity, right? It's like, oh, curious. How much of the race consciousness is promoting that? Right? So for us to free ourselves within ourselves is always the first step, right? For us to be aware, for us to notice. We get to practice stop. I was going to say stop, drop, and roll. Stop, breathe, and perceive. That's going to be my new mantra. Thanks, you guys, for helping me work this out. Because it came out, things drop in, and I'm like, what? Stop, drop, and perceive. Yeah, I'm going to put that in my back pocket. Right? Because we want to go. This is what it is, and then that's it. And really, we're all, that first quote I read, we are all like that. Think about it. We're in this dark cavity, cave, right? Perceiving from our own limited understanding. And you're over in your world, and I'm over in my world, and they're over in their. We're kind of bumping up against our worlds of perception, of understanding, but not the present moment, right? This is why the ancients, right? What has always been the call in our spiritual practice? To come into the now. To come into the now. To breathe. Let's all take a moment right now. Notice when we come into the breath, it brings us into the moment. And when we come into the moment, we come into our bodies. Oh, we might not like to come into our bodies. There might be some pain there. There might be some aches. Then we start to realize how actually distant we are from what actually is. I'm telling you, anyone have children? This is the recipe for meeting and greeting your beloved as your child, your beloved as your partner, your beloved as the people you're in service to, right? What is actually so versus what I believe is so? Because the spiritual law is, Jesus said it too, as we perceive, so shall we receive. And you know what that says to me? We have so much more power than any of us are stepping into. Did you hear what I just said? As you believe, you shall perceive. Meaning, if I believe it's so, it is going to show up. I'm going to look for all the evidence of it as that, and it will manifest. So why are we all walking around feeling so powerless? That's our greatest addiction. And that's actually the gateway drug. When we feel powerless, then we move into other behaviors that support that, because that's what we believe, right? I'm so grateful that Kay is here today, because I was thinking as I was writing this, oh, does she have a great story about her mom? And what was it that your mom always perceived the way life was?
Her favorite phrase was, just expect good things to happen.
Just expect good things to happen. And what did you say when you were young? Your mom would say that and you'd be like, oh my
I was
God.
glass half empty always. She was glass overflowing. I found it annoying.
Isn't that curious, right? So what did your mom end up perceiving?
Oh, she's found a good one.
Always. Yes. And you just had a very deep experience of seeing that.
Yeah. I was with her for 5.5 weeks before she died on December 27th. And her attitude was so incredible the entire time. So I had my son make a sign, lavender is my hair color, in lavender that says expect good things to happen. I have it mounted over my desk. So I'm trying to change my neural pathways, even though I didn't want to be much like her all my life, like in some ways. Like, man, she had something. She had a corner on the market of positivity.
Yes.
And I need to work on that.
Yes. Right? So yes, we can change our neural pathways. We can build new experience and evidence from which our brain can draw on. And we can notice, why am I saying that? I loved when you were like, I don't want to learn something new about my computer. How many times? I have to tell you, and I thank you all for this opportunity, because I have never done a PowerPoint and I learned how to do it. Big deal, right? For someone who is like, this is no big deal, but for me it's a big deal because it's my brain. It's putting that information in my brain saying, I can do this. Next time I can do it better. Next time I can add color. Right? Yeah. So it's I'm so excited about this, if you can't tell. And I love to bring it into my work when I'm working with a client. Okay? Because I'm telling you, forgiving yourself for judging yourself is one of the most powerful things you can do. And when you lay that down, this judgment of these reactions, why I always react this way, but even begin to understand the power that we are creating our reality. This is not just some foo-foo church on the side of the road that's been saying this, and maybe if I wish and try and, click my heels, it'll be true. No, it's actually our biology. It's actually how we're wired. And we can all have a lot more grace for other people who see things differently. Because you know what? They got a ton of evidence for how they see things. Right? That's why conversations don't work when you say, well, that's not true. Where does that go? It doesn't go anywhere. Right? But when we have this understanding within ourselves, oh, tell me more. Right? How is it that you see it that way? What experience is that born from? Right? Then we can start to have a conversation. And the same is true with your businesses, right? Are you tapped into the scarcity of the race consciousness? Are you tapped into the scarcity of the economy? There's not enough. What are your stories about business? Well, my father had a business and he had to work himself to the bone. Are you a workaholic? Right? Because that's the evidence you're drawing up. And the person that you're working with, notice where they're coming from. Right? You don't want to try to fight against their perception. You want to bring a new possibility. Curiosity, not confidence. That's a humdinger, right? Because I'm pretty clear I'm supposed to be confident. And if I'm confident, then I can, make But what if we were all available? See, curiosity is availability. I become available to an idea, to a perception, to an experience, and to a reality other than my own. And I know that my perception is limited. That's the biggest thing that prayer taught me, right? I do this whole prayer, what do you want prayer for? Okay, we want this, we want blah, blah, blah. And then at the end I go, I release this because I know my mind is limited, but the divine mind is infinite. Way bigger than what I think it can be, or it has been, or it shall be. So I know she's given me the signal here that I'm coming up to my time. Not that I'm an expert that I can answer a question, but anything you want to share, anything you want to add. How does this relate to what you already see and experience in your business, in your life, within yourself?
This is really interesting, but being just aware isn't going to solve the issue. You have to take personal actions to make changes. And you have to forgive yourself. I joke with my wife, I'm going down the rabbit hole again, right?
Yeah.
And so what I do to make the change, I may not go as far down, okay, but I notice it.
Yes.
So you have to take action and notice. And one other thought that comes to mind, the good, the bad, the ugly are not done to punish you. They're there to teach you something. Because that's part of our journey for being in the schoolhouse of life. So what did it teach you? And once I accepted that stuff, the resentments that I carried around, sometimes for decades,
Yes.
vanished. So to make this happen, to be curious, you have to let go of the stuff from the past, as you aptly put it, because your brain is pre-programmed to think a certain way.
Yes. Yes. There are steps. And what I say when I'm working with a client, find your first foothold. Right? Get a foothold. Right here. Get a foothold. Right? Oh, I'm aware. Because there's going to be a lot of things that come up with the awareness. There's going to be feelings. There's going to be fear. There's going to be doubt. Right? It's not just we have an awareness and then boom, we're on it. Or maybe so. What if I hold that? Right? We get to start playing with that idea.
It has occurred to me several times from what everyone is saying, and what you have spoken about of today. With the speed of the world to get to the next thing, I wonder if it's so easy to fall into, because I know I do it. Let's see what this is. It's coming at me. It must be this.
Yep.
So we can get to the next thing. It's this. I know what it is. I don't want it. Or
Yes.
I do want it. Right. Next thing. So
Yes.
that's what occurs to me.
Yes.
A lot of what is going on here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It helps us move things quickly. It helps us not get bogged down. It helps us feel safe. It keeps our sense of our identity. Right? Yeah. So I just invite you. I invite you to practice. If you get one thing, curiosity versus confidence. Because that really twists the mind, right? And it's really good to twist the mind and do new things. Every time you do something new, you're adding more to the Rolodex, right? Drive home a different way. Notice how you even go to the same stall when you go to the bathroom. Change your silverware drawer. I'm talking these are little things, but these affect the brain, right? And then we have to think, Or if you have children, invite them to travel. Because and all of us travel. When we travel, we get out of the rut of what always is and what we see. And we go, wow, you live like that? That's your experience? It expands us. And everything is about bringing more space so that we can receive more grace. and grace is beyond my mind. So thank you so much for playing with me today. This was fun.